We want to expand the conversation a little bit here because essentially we are talking about a country that is edging towards elections. And there is the voice as well that perhaps is leaning towards that of the opposition. I'm joined via Zoom now by Mr. Makomborero Haruzivishe, a pro-democracy activist from Zimbabwe. Sir, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to sit with the point that we've heard this morning from Mr. Matingarara, which is the lifting of sanctions is a symbol of the global community allowing Zimbabweans to vote for the party they want without influencing them to not vote for the governing party. What do you say to that?
My initial reaction to that would be that, number one, the real sanctions affecting Zimbabweans are corruption. And it is trained through illicit financial outflows, billions of US dollars from the Zimbabwean economy. We look Zimbabwe at some point with the largest deposits of diamonds. We have, huge deposits of gold, and it's not really helping down the people on the ground. If you are to go to Marange, where diamonds were mined, they went poor, in fact, instead of getting richer. So the more, affecting and crippling sanctions on Zimbabweans are corruption and also human rights abuses. These are things now, and we have to be more Pan-African. Let's do with the Motlanthe Commission of Inquiry, which correctly found out, its findings were that the Zimbabwean government unnecessarily killed the Zimbabweans in 2018, and it made recommendations. Some of them were accountability, and the Zimbabwean government has not done that. It has not prosecuted everyone, despite an African, a commission led by a former president of South Africa, saying that there were issues also to do with, reforms, electoral reforms, which were recommended in the Motlanthe Commission's findings and report, and they were not implemented. I would continue arguing that these are the real sanctions affecting Zimbabweans. And if you are to check the recent Afrobarometer survey, Zimbabweans believe that the most sanctions that are affecting Zimbabwe are those that are imposed by the government against its own people. Yes, now let's come to the restrictions, the travel restrictions and bans that are imposed on individuals like General Sanyatwe, who killed people in August 2018. Let's go to also like the European Union, to be specific in particular, which recently gave 1.4 million in aid to Zimbabwe, which my compatriots there in the studio is interpreting as an indication that they are going to lift, the ban on the Zimbabwe defense industries, which is the only maybe imaginable what you can call sanctions on Zimbabwe, but it's just Zimbabwe defense industries, and it's mainly to encourage, that the army doesn't commit human rights abuses, because most human rights abuses that are happening critically have been done by the army. And I want to use our more African platforms like the Motlanthe Commission of Inquiry, which made findings that the army killed people. Yeah. The army.
Okay, I think you have made that point. So and I want to get to this now. We essentially have seen this week the EU in conversation with the Zimbabwean government. Over €1 million that has been pledged by the EU towards the Zimbabwean government to say, well, we're going to assist you with health, which has been buckling, certainly under a lot of pressure, and we're going to assist you with what they've called electoral process. I mean, are you concerned about that, or is this a breath of fresh air for Zimbabwean citizens that's coming?
Zimbabwe, I would rather say, despite its richness, its riches in natural resources, in minerals, it's a kind of dependent on Western aid. Western aid in forms of, sponsorship by the Western countries like the European Union especially. We go to the US, we go to UK. And annually we receive around $850 million annually. And this 1.4 million, it's nothing really to shout or go home about, because for the past 7 years, Zimbabwe has received 434 million euros from the European Union. So this is not an indicator as to where. The only indicator we need around the lifting of sanctions are reforms. So the European Union has been clear and consistent on its policy with Zimbabwe, and it's around supporting the democratic processes. And critically, the European Union believes that electoral processes are the epicenter of democratic process in Zimbabwe or in any part of the world. So they are supporting. Why? Because the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is refusing to implement reforms like even the diaspora vote. They claim to have no resources. They are refusing to allow even the thousands that are in prisons, fellow Zimbabweans, despite the constitution saying that every Zimbabwean has the right to vote. They are denying them the right to vote based on resources. So it's actually shameful that for us to really determine our next leadership, we have to depend on the West, on Europe. Yet in the same line, we are blowing hot and cold on sanctions. Sanctions which, yeah.
Yeah, I think just to wrap it up, and I'm going to ask you the same question that I did when I closed off the conversation with Mr. Matingarare. You are speaking to us live right now from Zimbabwe, but we know that there is a massive community of Zimbabweans that are living in South Africa for economic opportunity because of the economic difficulty that Zim has gone through. And to them that are watching right now, what do you say about the upcoming election? Is there optimism that there is a greener economic future for Zimbabwe, a greener electoral and democratic future for Zimbabwe?
My message to them is that none but ourselves can liberate ourselves politically and economically. They need to go home and register to vote for change, because that's the only way we can have an environment that allows ourselves to develop, that allows ourselves to feel safe at home. They are refugees, political and economic refugees there, and no one is going to help us except for Zimbabweans. They need to come in their millions and vote if they really, because if the government really cared about them, if them being in the diaspora is a form of sanctions busting, then the government should also ensure that it extends the right to vote to them. South Africa is close by. We have an embassy in South Africa. It's close by. Every time when Mozambique votes, we see Mozambicans queuing in the streets of Harare to vote. But the current government knows that these people are in South Africa not because of the West. They are in South Africa not because of the opposition, but they're in South Africa because of corruption, because of human rights abuses. They're in South Africa.
Yeah, I need to leave it there.
My message is that they need to come back and register to vote. They need to come back and register and vote for change. That's the only solution.
And I think that while yourself and my previous guest may be sitting on opposite ends ideologically, what I find as a common thread here is that both of you are making the call for Zimbabweans to go and cast their vote in the upcoming elections. Thank you so much to Mr. Makomborero Haruzivishe, who is a pro-democracy activist from Zimbabwe, as well as Mr. Rutendo Matingarare, who is the chairman of the Zimbabwean anti-sanctions movement.